So the purpose of this video is to answer the question, why me? Why should I be the person that you listen to, that you have present to these kids a story that they can relate to, and then take answers from what they resonate with to then take a new direction in their part of life? The answer is because I've been through things, and I know things because of that, and I've grown through it so that I can now be able to show that to you, for you to take and do your own thing with it. So let me break it down for you. You know, I'm the kid that would come into school without having, the right type of clothes, who would only have one pair of jeans. Still today, 3 years later, I still have one pair of jeans that I'm wearing, that I'm patching up, that has holes in the crotch, that I only can maintain until, I have to get another, where I wear a white wrinkly shirt with coffee stains, and I happen to have a nice jacket to cover myself up and make me feel comfortable and to fit in. I was the kid that got picked on and maybe not so much bullied, but put down for smiling, for being a good person. It's a really odd thing when bullies are going to pick on you because you happen to be a shining light and a shining presence, and they don't like that because inside they feel a little bit darker. They feel unwelcome, they feel unaccepted, and it's just a lack of understanding that we're all really searching for, that intimacy. So instead of understanding you and trying to connect and be heard, they in turn throw out their insecurities onto you and make you feel like you're a bad person for being a shining presence. And what they say is actually what they're hurting with inside. So, a lot of people would put me down and I wouldn't feel welcome. I was the kid who would be somebody that would go from group to group to group to group to group to group and never fit in, never feel welcome, always feel like I'm that distance figure that nobody ever, took in, that nobody ever really sparked a conversation with. Like, I was just the person who went and tried to chat with every person and never really clicked. I just happened to be different. I happened to be the other crowd to everybody. Through middle school and through high school, everything really changed after I started switching schools. I was the kid that went to 7 different schools during my period from elementary through to K through 12 high school. And that really broke me up inside. I left all of these kids that I could relate to, and I began to switch different environments and be put in with different people. And, I was the kid who had to put in extra time to be able to work and get the grades so that I could pass the math class or the math test, who would befriend the kids who happened to be smarter and who could be able to teach me or help me get past this test, because I was struggling. So I would go in and during lunchtime go and ask these teachers to be able to give me additional time and help me. I put in a lot of work to be able to do things so that I could succeed. During lunchtime, I would have to find a way to be able to fit in, whether it's in the lunchroom, and I just knew that, or outside, I just knew that going into this group today, because I happened to see them yesterday, they might not feel so welcoming to just having me around, I never really fit in anywhere. I never really felt understood. I never really felt accepted. So I'm that kid that's a prime example of having to have a relationship that would love him, but never really feeling that understanding. So he was always distant, and not just with people in school, but also with my family, with my parents, with my brother. I was the kid who happened to have emotionally, mentally, verbally abusive parents who would not understand me, who wouldn't give me the attention I deserved, right? Who would put me in a place where their point of view and how they wanted things to be, their expectations I had to meet for them to feel any bit joyful or happy. Otherwise, if I didn't fit this perfect thing that they saw of me, then I wouldn't be accepted, I wouldn't be loved. So I had to consistently prove myself to be good enough for them so that, I could get their time and attention. And if I didn't, then they would criticize me and they would poke me and tell me, why do you do this? Like, get your stuff together. Like, why don't you do this? Why don't you do it this way? And like, go do this, I don't like it when you do this thing. And it's like, where do I get to say, I don't like it when you treat me this way, when you scream at me and yell at me and treat me in a way that I can't, eat if I don't fulfill these requirements. I always had to ask permission. I was always the person that was never really able to have a backbone for himself and had to search for how to be able to build himself up and have the words to speak for himself so that he could get his way. I was that kid. I was also the kid that had his parents split up at such a young age, at age 13, as a teenager, and new people, new roommates start coming in, and my mother also happens to be dating this man, and this man has a child who is very similar age to me, actually, and in the exact same age group. And because I didn't get to hang out with many friends outside in school, I spent most of my time at home, and that environment began to change where most of my time was spent with this kid who happened to be like my stepbrother of the boyfriend of my mother, whom I didn't like and eventually had to get used to. And because of that, I also had to find a need to fit in and do the things that they did to be able to get their attention so that I could get what I wanted, because my mother was involved in other things, which in turn brought that bad environment in with it too, in which case, that stepfather figure ended up becoming, or ended up bringing in his alcoholic lifestyle and became verbally abusive. And he would scream and yell, and he didn't make sense because his brain wasn't wired right, because he had been doing this for such a long time. And eventually it gets to the point where we don't understand each other enough, and to be able to make things work, we have to get in a fist fight with my step boyfriend of my mother. I was the kid who separated myself from his father because he somehow didn't understand him and ended up resenting him because of my parents splitting up, and didn't see things the way that he saw them, because I was so bought into my mom's story that I didn't believe my dad's story. So therefore, I ruined my own relationships, and I have to take responsibility for that. I'm the kid that has a relationship with his family where it's so broken and so sad that I don't even get to have the time to say, like, I'd love to have a conversation with you, with my dad, with my mother, with my brother. Because once I start having a conversation with them, they ask me, why do you care? I don't have the intimate connection that most of you might have with your family, with your friends, with the people you hang out with. I've been through a lot. And not only that, but my physical challenges have set me back to a point where I'm literally dying each and every day. My spine is becoming more degenerated. My back is curving over like this, and actually more like this direction. And I'm becoming a hunchback cripple, and I'm actually a dancer, I'm an entertainer, I'm a performer, I'm an artist, and I'm a singer, and I want to be that person. But I can't get there until I have the money to afford all of the healing, the surgeries, whatever it may take for me to be able to get back into that state. So I can dance, I can be me. So instead of pursuing that path, I'm the kid who now has to grow into being his own person and being a speaker because I've done all the healing internally and emotionally that I have had to take care of, that now I've developed the emotional awareness to understand myself and empathize with the rest of the world and connect with them. And I have the emotional intelligence to teach them and show them what the right thing is from the wrong, because I know the exact opposite because of what I grew up with, because of the influence that I had, because I was the kid who didn't get the attention, and to get the attention had to be somebody he wasn't. And also, because I wasn't myself, and because I had to have all these expectations met, that means other people poked my bubble, my point of view, until my bubble shrunk so much that, you know, the way that I thought had to be this exact way, and it turned into me believing more of what other people would say than myself, so my brain became manipulated. I was deceived, I was lied to, I was tricked. I was the person who didn't know who he was, so much so that he became sick, and he had a giant red beard around his mouth that was scaly, it was itchy, it was peeling, and it was his body internally that was eating away at itself, projecting that he didn't know who he was. And I figured out that my parents were abusive when I was in college. My parents were abusive. I figured out that my parents were abusive. And because of that, I then had to step out of that environment. I had to drop my job, I had to drop college, I had to stop everything that I was doing because I was so sick. I couldn't think on my own. I had brain fog, I had to change my eating, I had to change my lifestyle, I had to change everything that I was doing, and I went onto a path where I started to work for myself and what I believed in, and I found my own voice through interviewing people, through speaking with people, trying to sell products like branding and marketing services, trying to be a leader, trying to represent somebody that was me, and asking questions like, why do I feel this way, the way I do when I do this thing? And eventually, it came into a point where I figured out exactly who I am, and I had to ask myself the question, you know, what would you do if you found out today that you only had 6 months to live? What would you do with your life? And the answer was, I would do all the things I thought I couldn't do. I would do martial arts. I would do parkour again. I would dance. And dance was the one thing I didn't do. And within 4 months, I figured out, hey, you know what? Not only am I a dancer, I'm an entertainer, I'm a performer, I'm an artist, and I'm a singer. I'm this jack of all trades performer, and I want to share my best self, my talent, with you, but I can't do it because I'm still held back from my health challenges. From when I was age 13, I had a surgery, and that surgery was a failure. That surgery was on my testicle. And because of that, it affected my mind and everything I did, everything I focused on, everything I gave meaning to, everything I brought into life by doing was a development of my insecurities because of the way I thought. Everything was a language to cover up my problems rather than open them up and express myself with the world. I was concealing myself. I was hiding behind this image of someone I was not. And because I opened up and was vulnerable about that, I made the courageous choice. That's how I figured out who I am. And that's why I'm called to speak at schools today. Because the youth need to have somebody who has a voice. They need to have somebody to look up to. They need to have that adult figure who's been through some stuff and knows who he is, and then take that understanding that they have in communicating with them, not at them, and internalize it and figure out themselves and have the answers by asking themselves questions and having somebody whom they believe in. And we just don't have enough of that today, you know, because we just don't understand ourselves. We're all caught up on social media in this very fast-paced scanning environment where immediately we get short-term benefits by double tapping on something. So instead of living in the short term, I speak on living in the long term. You know, my personal why is to inspire people to be emotionally free so we can truly express ourselves, be understood, and live in synergy. So everything I do is based on those words. And if there's anything I can do, it's to be able to create more of a team-oriented environment in anything that you do. Because you speaking with somebody else, it's about understanding them, their interests, and stepping into their shoes and knowing, hey, this is what they've been through, and this is who I'm communicating to, and this is how we can connect. You know, my life story may not be the most challenging, the most painful, the most difficult, but it certainly brought a lot of harmony in my life because I've grown through it. I've become the person I actually am by having gone through all of the hardships that have troubled me along the way. So if I can do anything, it's share my story. If I can do anything, it's have myself be somebody that you can relate to. And it's to set the example. It's to speak into existence the motivation that you have to speak into developing emotional intelligence, which is a very undervalued skill, talent that we have today. I recommend that you follow your talents, what you're actually good at, because when you focus on your weaknesses, you're going to put time into something that you're just insecure about and you may not ever get good at. It's a waste of time to not activate your potential, to not love yourself, and to not share yourself with the world. So when you do those three things in a positive light, when you figure out who you are, you activate your potential, you love yourself, and you share all that you are, that in turn gives you a life of bliss, because bliss is simply the activation of the function of potential and giving all that you can, being of service to somebody else, and loving yourself. So that's what I want for you. I want for you to answer the questions that come into your life, asking, why do I feel this way when I do this thing? You know, what am I good at and what am I not? I have to be able to understand myself, and to do that I have to accept my shortcomings and also accentuate upon my strengths and make my decisions based on the opening in between. If there's anything that you get from this message, it's not listening to me, it's understanding yourself. It's listening to yourself and then bringing that into the world to benefit the health of the whole atmosphere. Living in synergy. I'm here to inspire people to be emotionally free so we can truly express ourselves, be understood, and live in synergy. So whatever you got from my story, whatever you got from my pains, I didn't exactly share all of the benefits from it, but I want to tell you what those are. So if you got anything that you related to or resonated with, write it down. Maybe you have problems at home. Maybe you have problems with your parents. You know, maybe you have problems with your husband or your wife. Emotionally, that relationship, it's friction. It's causing friction. Well, write it down what you need to do. Maybe you just, instead of, not listening to them, you need to empathize with them. And maybe instead of having a debate, an argument that never ends and nobody ever agrees, you just agree with them, and then you start appreciating what it is that attracts you to them. Like, oh, I appreciate you telling me that I make a mess. You're right, I do make a mess. And, me leaving all these dishes everywhere and never cleaning up after myself always causes a greater problem, because then we never get to eat later at night when you want to make dinner for the both of us. And I can totally understand. I love it when you keep me on my toes. You keep me being a leader. As a man of this house, you are always making me a better person, and I love that about you. You see, like if you did that every single day, when your partner came home, when your kids came home, when you ask what their failures are, instead of just their wins, when you allow failure to be an environment that you embrace, you then figure out who you actually are, because you accept your shortcomings and you also accentuate upon your strengths, and you gain the self-awareness and make the best decisions focused on the futurity of your decisions. and organized plans of action. If you did anything in your life, if you just planned your day and figured out, how to be able to develop positive relationship with yourself and the rest of the world, you'd be on top. And the 1% of producers in this world. But first, what it takes is self-awareness. And if you have emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, the world is going to love you. Because you're truly being you. And it'll vibrate and share through you. It'll express you through the universe at a wavelength that you've never understood before. Because you're expressing what the universe made you to be. So it's all up to you. I'd love to come and speak with you, speak for you, and connect with you. So my request in you watching this video is for you to figure out what you need to do. If you want me on your stage, I would love to come and speak. Please, get back to me and let's have a conversation. Have a blessed day and take care of the world, okay?